It started with sirens, not the kind that wail in the distance and fade into someone else's problem. These stopped right outside my house. I remember standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a teacup, when the blue and red light began to strobe across my walls. My first thought was that someone must have had an accident, maybe one of the kids down the block. I dried my hands, stepped to the window, and saw two patrol cars idling in front of my yard. Then I saw the officers walking toward my porch. For a moment, I just froze, hands damp, heartbeat loud enough to hear in my ears. You know how sometimes your body knows before your mind does? That was me. Something deep inside me whispered, "This is about you." I'd lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I was the quiet one, polite, predictable, the neighbor people borrowed sugar from but rarely invited over. Every morning I walked the same route, waved at the same joggers, and trimmed the same hydrangeas that grew along my fence line. The kind of woman you'd never look at twice, until suddenly everyone's looking. The officer who spoke first had kind eyes, but his words were heavy. "Mrs. Hale, we'd like to ask you a few questions about an incident that happened last night." "An incident?" I repeated, my voice small. He exchanged a glance with his partner. "There was a break-in at the Miller's place. Their security footage shows someone who looks a lot like you." I laughed. A soft, nervous sound. "Like me?" He nodded. "We just need to clear a few things up." My throat tightened. "You think I broke into their house?" "Ma'am, we're not saying that. We just need to talk." But when they said talk, they meant follow us. I remember the way my neighbors looked as I stepped out onto the porch, curtains moving just enough to reveal eyes. Mrs. Lang from across the street stood frozen on her lawn, clutching her dog's leash. The young couple next door whispered something I couldn't hear. In 15 years, no one had ever noticed me. Now, I was the headline of their morning? Tell me in the comments, have you ever been judged before you even had the chance to speak? At the station, they sat me in a cold room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and fear. I stared at the metal table, tracing invisible circles with my fingertip, waiting for someone to tell me what this was.
Finally, an officer slid a file across to me. Inside was a still frame from a security video, grainy, night vision green. The figure was wearing a hoodie, face partially hidden. But the shape, the posture, it did look like me. "She was carrying a tote bag," he said, "same kind you always have on your morning walks." I wanted to say that thousands of women carry tote bags, that resemblance isn't guilt, but my voice didn't come. It was like fear had reached up and pressed its hand against my throat. After 2 hours, they let me go. No arrest, no apology, just that look in their eyes that said, "We're watching you." When I got home, the neighborhood was quiet again. Too quiet. The mail sat unopened in my box, and someone had placed a note under my doormat. People aren't always what they seem. I didn't need to check who wrote it. Gossip doesn't need signatures. That night, I sat on my porch long after dark. The street was still except for the occasional passing car. Every sound, a dog barking, a branch creaking, felt suspicious. I'd always loved this neighborhood for its peace, but peace can turn into loneliness the moment people decide you don't belong. If you're still here, tell me, what hurts more, being accused of something you didn't do, or realizing how fast people believe it? When I finally went inside, the answering machine light was blinking. A message from the detective. "Mrs. Hale, we may need to talk again tomorrow. The footage shows more than we thought." I stood in the hallway, phone in my hand, pulse thudding. And just like that, I realized something simple but terrifying. The truth might not be enough. I'll tell you what happened next.
The next morning, the world carried on as if nothing had happened. Cars left for work, sprinklers clicked on, and the mail truck made its familiar stop at the end of the street. But inside my house, the silence felt heavier, like the air had learned how to listen. I made tea, but didn't drink it. I tried reading, but every sentence blurred into the same question. How does a life so ordinary suddenly look guilty? At 10 o'clock sharp, Detective Larkin came by again. He was polite, careful, the kind of man who carried authority like a shadow. He asked if he could look through my garage. Just routine, he said. Routine. That word has a way of making you feel small. I watched as he examined my shelves. Garden tools, bags of soil, the old bicycle that hadn't seen sunlight in years. He took pictures of my tote bag, the one I used for groceries, and nodded thoughtfully like it had a secret to confess. "Do you have any security cameras on your property?" he asked. "No," I said. "Never thought I needed any." He smiled faintly. "Most people don't, until something happens." Then he left, but his presence stayed, in the form of boot prints on my driveway and the echo of suspicion in my ears. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt unsafe in your own home, not because of danger, but because of doubt? By afternoon, word had spread. The grocery clerk who always chatted with me kept her conversation short. The woman who used to wave when walking her dog now crossed the street before passing my house. It's strange how quickly kindness can turn into caution. Even my mailbox seemed to flinch when I opened it. Inside was a flyer from the neighborhood watch group, a meeting that evening to discuss recent safety concerns. There was no name attached, but I didn't need one. They were meeting about me. I sat in my living room staring at that piece of paper until the sunlight shifted across the floorboards. Then I saw movement through my front window. Mr. Miller, the man whose house had been broken into, standing by his driveway, talking to someone on the phone. His gestures sharp, his eyes flicking toward my house. He noticed I was watching, and for a second, our eyes met. He didn't wave. He just turned away. That evening, I walked to the community center where the meeting was held. Part of me thought it would show strength. The other part just didn't want to hide. When I stepped inside, conversations faltered the way they do when guilt enters the room, even when it hasn't been proven. The meeting started. People spoke in careful phrases, recent incidents, unfamiliar figures, strangers at night. No one said my name, but they didn't need to. Every sentence ended with a glance in my direction. Finally, I stood. "I know what you think," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "But I didn't do it. I've lived here 15 years. You know me." Silence. A few people looked away. One man coughed. And then Mrs. Lang, the same woman who'd once left soup on my doorstep when I had the flu, said softly, "Maybe we don't know anyone as well as we think." Her words landed like a verdict. "If you're still here, tell me, have you ever watched Trust Guy, not with shouting but with quiet agreement?" I walked home under the streetlights, their halos of pale orange reflecting on the wet pavement. It had rained while we were inside, a sudden, unannounced downpour. The world smelled of earth and accusation. When I reached my porch, I noticed something taped to my door, a single sheet of paper. It was a still image printed from the security footage. Underneath, in thick marker, "Neighbors deserve the truth." I folded it carefully, carried it inside, and set it on the counter. The next day, Detective Larkin called again. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "we reviewed the footage frame by frame. There's something off about it. It might have been altered." "Altered?" "Yes, it's possible someone tampered with the timestamps." "Then it wasn't me." He hesitated. "We're still verifying, but the original file came from Mr. Miller's home system." For the first time in days, a different kind of silence filled me, not fear, but the slow awakening of anger. Because in this neighborhood, technology was supposed to protect people, not frame them. If the video had been edited, then someone wasn't just mistaken, someone was lying. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching headlights glide across the cul-de-sac. Every car that slowed made my pulse jump. Every shadow made me question who I'd ever trusted. And then, around midnight, I saw it, a figure walking up the Miller's driveway, hood up, same posture as the one in the footage. They weren't breaking in this time, just moving carefully toward their mailbox, glancing around, like checking something. I leaned closer to the glass, heart racing. Then the figure turned their head just enough for the porch light to catch their face, and I saw who it was. It wasn't me. It was someone I'd known for years. For a second, I couldn't move. It was like my eyes refused to match what my mind already knew. The figure under that porch light wasn't a stranger. It was Tom Lang, my neighbor's husband, the same man who'd helped me fix my gutter last spring, who waved every Sunday when he mowed his lawn. He stood at the Miller's mailbox, glancing around, then slipped an envelope inside and hurried away. The hood hid most of his face, but I knew that walk, the slightly uneven gait, the way he carried one shoulder higher than the other. I waited until he disappeared into the night before I exhaled. My hands trembled against the window frame. If he'd been the one behind the break-in, why use my image to cover it? I barely slept that night. I kept replaying the scene in my mind over and over, trying to convince myself I hadn't imagined it. By sunrise, I decided I couldn't just sit in that house and hope the truth found me. I had to go find it myself. So I baked a batch of blueberry muffins. It sounds foolish, I know, but in our neighborhood, baked goods were currency. The unspoken way of entering someone's confidence. When I carried the plate over to the Lang's door, Mrs. Lang opened it with a smile too bright to be real. "Morning," I said softly. "Oh, Margaret, how are you holding up?" she asked, eyes slicking past me toward the police car that still drove by every few hours. "Doing my best," I said, holding out the muffins. "Thought I had returned the kindness you once showed me." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." The Lang's house smelled of lemon cleaner and something metallic underneath. Maybe nerves. Tom was in the den, pretending to read the paper, but his hands gave him away. They were restless. When he saw me, his expression faltered just long enough to confirm what I already felt. Guilt has a shape, and it was sitting right in front of me. I smiled gently. "Tom, I heard they're still reviewing that footage. Terrible business, isn't it? I never realized how much cameras can lie." He looked up sharply. "What do you mean by that?" "Just that technology can be tricky. Sometimes timestamps don't line up. Faces blur. People see what they want to see." He stared at me for a long moment before forcing a laugh. "Well, let's hope they sort it out soon." I nodded, pretending to agree, but inside I was memorizing everything. The twitch in his jaw, the way Mrs. Lang avoided looking at either of us.
That evening, I called Detective Larkin. "Detective," I said, "you mentioned the footage might have been altered. Do you know who had access to it?" He sighed. "Only Mr. Miller,
and anyone who helped him install the system. Why? I hesitated because I think I saw someone tampering with their mailbox last night. Someone who walks like Tom Lang. Silence on the other end. Then, are you sure? As sure as I am of my own reflection. He told me to stay put, to keep quiet for now. They'd investigate. But keeping quiet was easier said than done. Not because I wanted revenge, but because truth, once it's awake, doesn't like to sleep again. The next morning, the Lang's driveway was empty. Their car was gone. So was the for sale sign that hadn't been there yesterday. By noon, Detective Larkin called. "You were right," he said. Tom Lang worked part-time in home security. He installed Miller's cameras 2 years ago. My knees went weak. He continued. The footage was edited using old timestamps. He replaced sections with clips from your morning walks. It took time, but we traced the data trail. He framed you to keep suspicion off himself. I sat down slowly, the phone pressed to my chest. He'd stolen my face to hide his crime. He'd used my quiet life as camouflage. When the police found the Langs, they were already out of state. It took weeks, but the truth finally followed them. They caught Tom after he used one of the stolen cards at a hardware store. The local paper ran a small piece on it. Suburban theft case solved. Local woman cleared of wrongdoing. No apology, no quote, just a paragraph between headlines. But the neighbors read it. They started waving again. The grocery clerk smiled. Even Mrs. Miller stopped avoiding eye contact. Still, something had changed. The world doesn't fully go back after it decides you're capable of something dark. The silence stays, polite but cautious. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been proven right, but still felt like you lost something? A week later, I came home to find a letter on my porch. No envelope, just folded paper with a shaky signature. "I'm sorry, Margaret. I didn't know what he'd done until it was too late. Carol Lang." There was no address, no forwarding number, just that. I folded it carefully and placed it beside my teacup. Apologies, I've learned, don't need to arrive with explanations. They just need to arrive at all. That night, I went for a walk through the neighborhood. The same streets, the same houses, but they felt different now. Not smaller, not colder, just honest. Because when everyone's seen you at your lowest, there's no more pretending. And maybe, in a strange way, that's its own kind of freedom.
Spring came early that year. The air smelled like wet soil and clean starts. The kind of mornings when sunlight feels new again, as if even the sky is ready to forget. The police cars stopped patrolling our street. Neighbors stopped whispering when I walked by. And for the first time in months, I left my porch light off at night. It wasn't defiance. It was peace. I found myself noticing small things again. The hum of bees in my hydrangeas, the soft squeak of the gate when I opened it, the way my old cat followed me around the yard, as if to remind me I was still someone's safe place. After everything, life had returned, not to normal, but to something deeper, the kind of calm you only earn after surviving noise. One afternoon, Mrs. Miller came by. She stood at my porch steps holding a pie she'd baked, blueberry, my favorite. Her eyes were watery with something between regret and relief. I should have come sooner. We all should have. I smiled faintly. People believe what they're shown. We all do. She nodded, biting her lip. Tom Lang's wife sent us a letter too. Said she's sorry, said he's serving time. I didn't ask for details. Forgiveness doesn't always need context. Sometimes silence does the work better. I took the pie, thanked her, and we stood there for a moment, not as accuser and accused, but as two women trying to make sense of a world that can change overnight. Before she left, she said softly, "You were always the quiet one, Margaret. I guess we mistook quiet for guilt." I smiled. It's an easy mistake. people forget silence can also mean strength. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been punished just for being quiet? That evening, I walked down to the park at the end of our street. The sun was setting, a slow spill of gold across the sky. I sat on a bench beneath the oak tree and listened to the wind moving through its leaves. I thought about everything that had happened, the accusation, the fear, the looks that burned without words. I thought about how fragile a reputation really is, how it can be taken by one rumor and never return the same way.
But I also thought about something else. How truth, no matter how buried, has a stubborn way of finding daylight. When I got home, I placed the newspaper clipping in Carol Lang's apology letter inside my kitchen drawer, the one where I keep recipes and things worth remembering. Not as proof, but as a reminder that peace sometimes comes dressed like survival. I poured myself tea, sat by the window, and watched the streetlights blink on one by one. Each porch light was a small truce, a quiet way of saying, "We see you again." For the first time in a long while, I let myself believe them. If you're still here, tell me, do you think the world ever really learns from the people it falsely blames, or do we just learn to live softer after it? These days, my life is simple again. I tend my garden, wave at the mailman, and smile at the joggers who used to avoid my side of the street. The neighborhood feels different now, not kinder exactly, but more cautious with its certainty. And me? I'm still quiet, but it's not the silence of fear anymore. It's the silence of someone who knows she survived misunderstanding and came out whole. So when the wind rustles through my trees and the chimes on the porch sing softly, I think of all the people who have ever been accused, doubted, or misunderstood, and I whisper the same prayer I whispered the night they cleared my name. Let the truth speak for those who can't. Then I close my eyes, take a long breath, and let the stillness settle around me like forgiveness finally finding its home. Because here, on True Life Stories, we don't just tell stories, we remember them. Subscribe, stay with us, and help the silence end one true story at a time.